Welcome again. So this meeting is being recorded and we'll share it with you afterwards. I ask that everybody put themselves onto mute, and that's looking good so far. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions along the way, you can feel free to type them into the chat. Or even if you know what you might be looking to see during the demonstration, if there are features of particular interest, I'd love to get your requests and we can focus in on some of those. As I mentioned, today's webinar is in partnership with the United Way of British Columbia. We're very thankful to them for helping to promote this session. And they are also hosting a second webinar immediately following this with our CEO, Tony Goodrow. So we're going to drop a link in the chat later on for instructions on how you might like to join that session as well. My name's Cameron Seger. I'm the software sales advisor at Better Impact. And so I work with organizations all across Canada, small orgs to big orgs, really anybody with an interest in working with volunteers and better managing that data. And that includes community organizations, nonprofits of all sizes, educational and healthcare institutions, sporting organizations, and more. I hold a French degree and a Master of Business Administration, and I've also been trained in business analysis, which lends itself to some of the content we're going to discuss today, particularly in considering your software needs and how to carefully compare different vendors. My background is also in administration of various sorts, implementing information systems, and I've worked a lot with nonprofits in this role in consulting as well as grants administration. I live near Better Impact's headquarters in Hamilton, Ontario, and so I'm very happy to be working with Canadian organizations of all sorts. Today's session is going to really be covering how to compare VMS vendors and give you a demonstration of volunteer impact. So we're going to discuss some of the common problems faced by volunteer service teams, why the right software matters, how to evaluate your options, features and benefits of volunteer impact. Really, that's going to take the form of a short demonstration, why people love using our software, and then a few other resources. I want to reserve some time for a bit of Q&A at the end as well. So the problems, multiple problems faced by many organizations with maybe the wrong tools for volunteer management may include too much time spent on data entry, using disconnected tools for the job, not having enough time, of course, to lead and engage your volunteers, especially if you feel you're bogged down with the administration. You're also wanting to find affordable tools that leadership will approve, and you may be worried about insufficient security of your confidential volunteer data. So for over 20 years, Better Impact has been proposing a unified solution we call Volunteer Impact, which is web-based software to manage your volunteers and hold all of that data in one place. And it's very secure. It's ISO 27001, 27017 certified, which speaks volumes. We've had to jump through so many hoops to get that certification. Now, why do you think it matters to have the right tools in place? Well, according to G2.com's State of Software Happiness Report in 2019, and G2, by the way, is a kind of a software marketplace that's full of reviews of all sorts of different software. It has tools for comparing vendors and software as well, based largely on the reviews of users from around the world. So according to that survey, more than half of all employees are unhappy at work because of the software tools they're using. And what's worse is, according to those respondents, about 1 in every 8 employees could even quit a job because of mismatched software, which is really an issue we may not have considered before, that the tools for our job really do contribute to our happiness and satisfaction at work. And so people may leave not just for greater benefits or salaries or location, but also to have the tools that they are happy using. Our hope is that by implementing a volunteer management system, be it ours or in others, you will take yourself from less of those unhappy feelings to more of those elated at work feelings. So the benefits of using a volunteer management system are many: better use of your time and reporting, improving your communications and stakeholder engagement, improving that integrity and security of your data, getting better value by consolidating those systems, hopefully better visibility of your program as well through using technology. Having an online application form can actually improve your recruitment as well and make it easier for potential volunteers to apply. Better accessibility to your data, and through all of that, better morale and retention of both volunteers and staff. It's all sorts of benefits that you can hope to achieve. So to land at that better place, a change will have to happen. We believe that you can and will get there, but you and your team will have to acknowledge that doing so requires change. So over the next few minutes, we're going to discuss a plan to effect that very change. But before we go any further, let's think about what's preventing change. By and large, it's our attitudes that get in the way, right? So our attitudes are learned ways of responding to people and situations based on beliefs, values, and assumptions that we hold are reflected in our behavior. Some of those attitudes are on this slide. Thinking we can't afford it, or that using software is going to take away from the personal touch, worries that volunteers can't use technology, or that it's too much work to make a change. I'm sure that with a little reflection, you can come up with a few other attitudes in your workplace that may also be standing in the way. So given that our attitudes can appear at different times throughout the journey to change, our message here is to check in with yourselves and ask your teammates to do so as well before, during, and beyond the journey, in terms of whether your attitudes are creating friction or flow in supporting your team's ability to get to your desired state. I think that together you can reach that goal. Okay, let's get to it. Today, we're sharing with you a template for how you and your team can follow the template that you can follow to make this process of finding your VMS easier. In follow-up to this session, I will be sending you a link to our VMS Buyer's Guide and the worksheets that you're about to see. And so over the next few minutes, let's discuss and take a look at those worksheets and how you could fill them in to help you to select a new software system. We're going to begin by defining our problem and setting our goals. So there could be many challenges that you're experiencing, and the key here is going to be to shed some light on the main problems. We can't possibly cover all of them. Some of them are of greater priority due to their consequential impact on people and the organization. So we're going to focus on those. On the worksheet, you'll begin by brainstorming some of the problems that are being faced, such as too much time spent on data entry or staff who are unable to access the information that they need to do their jobs or to make decisions or to fill the schedule or to write reports or to write grant applications, you name it. So you want to seek input from the team members in terms of what they view as problems. You think about talking with volunteer services, with information technology, with your volunteers, with your fundraisers and grant writers, with your board of directors and others. And so as you fill in these problems, you'll want to keep track of who is affected and the consequences if the problem is not resolved. Those consequences might include volunteer turnover, failure to deliver on your mission, damage to the reputation of a person or organization or otherwise. Then we'll identify the top few problems to include in your problem statement, write a proposed solution. Essentially, that's going to be what's seen on this slide, but you can reword it to your liking. That's what I mean down here. With a problem statement defined, you can then move on to identifying what is your goal. And again, your goal might resemble what's here on this slide, to select a volunteer management system that our team is confident will solve our challenges and elevate our program or organization to new heights of mission achievement. Please rewrite it to your liking. But with a problem statement and goal known, then you can get those in front of leadership to get a thumbs up in support of this project. Now, taking a solo approach to choosing a system that will be used by many people with different needs is a recipe to fall short and not choose the right VMS. So we hope you'll take a team approach, which should get you better results because you'll be taking everyone into consideration. You'll want some representatives from across the organization on your team. That might include, while your volunteer coordinator, manager, or director, of course, those are key users of the system. It'd be great to include a few volunteers. They will be users as well. And of course, they're the ones whose data is being handled here. They've got a vested interest in having the right solution. You'll surely want to chat with somebody from IT. They are often very interested in data security and privacy and will help you to vet those requirements. You'll likely need one or both of your executive director or board of directors. Likely these will be your project sponsors and champions to keep it moving forward. And depending on your organization, you may also involve a project manager or a consultant who will tend to keep everybody moving at pace and on schedule and accountable to their deliverables. So again, you'll take a minute to fill in your worksheet, get everybody's names here, and make sure that everyone is going to have a voice at the table. Okay, so we've got a goal, we've got a team. Now let's take a look at what are our needs. So it's a critical step. The needs assessment is going to be the measuring stick against which each vendor, each software system would be compared. You're vetting more than just the system, but also the company and the people who stand behind it, who build it, who are going to keep it going, who are going to work with you during setup, and who will support you throughout your use of the software. So you'll want to consider elements like the vendor's profile, their stability, how long have they been around, what's their decision-making like, technical considerations as well, around security, access to data, standards, accessibility, and other considerations. What is support like? How responsive are they? What are their hours? How can you get in touch? Is it free or do you pay extra? What are your options for training and more? Budget, of course, is going to come into consideration here. Functional requirements as well. This is probably what you're already thinking of by your needs. What can the system do and what can't it do for you when you are actually sitting there in front of your computer? What can you do with it? As well as usability, like how intuitive and easy to use is it? And you may also be thinking about scalability. In case your program grows or shrinks or changes over time, will the system change with you? So that's going to result in filling in a vendor profile sheet similar to this, followed by a needs table like this. This may look familiar. By another name, this would be a ranked scorecard. which is a fantastic tool for comparing your options, not just for software, but for all sorts of decisions you make in business and life. It's a great tool to have. So on this sheet, you would be filling in your needs on each row, and you'll likely have a much longer table than this as you take all those needs into consideration. And then in the second column, you'll want to prioritize your needs. There's different rubrics you might use for this prioritization. One of the most common ones, however, is must have, should have, and nice to have. So a must have need is mandatory, and anybody who doesn't deliver on it is easily disqualified from your considerations. A should have need is very important. Definitely it adds value, but you can manage to work without it. And a nice to have is really, it's a bonus. You'd love to see it there, but you can certainly do without. Okay, with this table now built, let's take a look at your journey to consider and compare your vendors. The first stage will be to determine your VMS contenders. So you're going to assemble quite a long list here. Then you might move into demonstrations of the software, trialing the software, and then finally making a decision to subscribe or purchase the selected option. In many organizations, this could take 2 to 4 months. I've seen it faster, and I've certainly seen it go slower with large institutions as well. It's highly contingent on the organization of your team, how often you can meet, and how complex are your considerations and evaluations. So in that first stage of determining your VMS contenders, you'll want to have your needs assessment in hand. You'll have reviewed it with your project team as well. And then you'll move into doing vendor research, likely looking at several different websites and chatting with other volunteer coordinators that you know, reading reviews online, and starting to contact those vendors. One helpful resource that we have to help you is the volunteersoftwarecomparisons.com, which has a list of most of the well-known VMS providers and links to their reviews on a few different websites. It's a great place to start and then carry on with your own evaluations. So the result of this will be a list of VMS vendors. Perhaps you'll have already eliminated a few just based on what you've read online. I think it's important throughout this process, though, that you do keep notes about everyone that you've looked at and why they do or don't move forward in your consideration, because you may need to refer back to this at some later time. Maybe a month down the road, somebody says, hey, what about this vendor? Well, you can easily refer back and say, no, we've already thought about that, and here's why we haven't taken it further. So here in step one, you may have just started with, what's online, technological requirements, perhaps, and you say, okay, we're going to take 3 of these forward. Here's the reason why X, Y, Z didn't make it. Step 2, we're getting into demonstrations. This is going to be a little bit more time consuming because you're going to gather, of course, members of your team together to sit through demonstrations that could be 30 to 60 minutes. It could be something like this webinar. It could be watching demonstrations that are recorded and shared online. There's lots of those that you can find on Better Impact's website. It could also be attending live demonstrations, which you may choose to schedule with the vendors of interest. And you should save some time as well to ask your questions about those demonstrations, hopefully get some personalization so that you are seeing the features that are of interest to you. You'll want to meet again after you've seen those to discuss what you've seen, and make some decisions about who is worth considering further. So that could look something like this. We had 3 vendors, we've watched all their demos, and we've disqualified one for certain reasons. We didn't think it looked good on screen. It didn't seem to have the reporting capabilities that we need. You'll know which requirements are most important to you at this stage. And now, having spent some time on demonstrations and shortlisted down to hopefully just 2 or 3 contenders at this stage, it's time to get our hands dirty. Let's ask those vendors for a trial of the software, hopefully a free trial. Those tend to range from 7 days to 30 days, depending on who you're speaking with different capabilities. Some trials are going to be full featured, others will have some features capped or cut off. So of course, know what you're getting out of that trial. And I think it's really important at this stage that you and your team, or at least those people who will be using the trial, have set the time aside to actually work in it. It's unfortunate, of course, to ask for a trial, go through the time and realize you've only logged into it once or twice and you didn't actually get to figure out if it was right for you. At that point, maybe you're going to try and say, okay, well, we saw what we needed in the demo. Maybe you're going to ask the vendor for an extension for your trial, or some other circumstance. We don't want your selection process to get stalled here because you didn't have the time to put into it. So do make sure that when you're getting started with your project, of course, you've got that buy-in from your directors and from management to take the time away from some of your day-to-day to dig into this process. Now, the result of having your trials might be that you have got it down to one preferred vendor, and you'll have recorded your reasons why. And you can now take this to your sponsor or your decision makers, so that they can move on to the last step of subscribing or purchasing the software. That may, in some organizations, take a bit of time as they review some of the legalese, the terms and conditions of your subscription or purchase, make sure that everything is good. You may have started to look at those during your previous steps as well, though. So ultimately, we've gone through those steps. We have thought about what we need together as a team. We've found a list of potential vendors. We have spoken with them. We've had demonstrations, we've tried the software, and we've narrowed the field down to a preferred vendor who we're excited to work with. Now, I'm going to move into presenting to you about Volunteer Impact, which is Better Impact's volunteer management system. The features in our software are meant to serve volunteer engagement professionals and volunteers alike, with benefits that range throughout the volunteer life cycle. I'm not going to bore you with reading everything that you see here. I'm going to show it to you instead. So please bear with me just for a moment while I switch which screen is being shared with you. I'm checking the chat as well in case anybody has asked to see something in particular. Okay, you should now be seeing the administrator dashboard of Volunteer Impact. This is our example City Museum account. If you've ever watched our demonstration videos online, you'll have seen this account before. This current user has access to multiple modules of Better Impact software. It's our volunteer module first and foremost. But this account has also activated member impact and donor impact. These are tools to have a larger list of contacts in your system, some of whom are donors who may be giving online. We're not going to dig into those features today. I'm just mentioning that to you. We do also have an alternative edition called the Enterprise Edition, which allows you to have an overarching level that oversees a number of sub-accounts, which could be representative of sites or locations, programs, units, teams, or other divisions of your organization that need to be somewhat siloed from each other while benefiting from a standardization across the board, while allowing the upper echelons to communicate with volunteers across the board and to run reports on the activities and the hours and the other data across that entire set of sub-accounts. Now, on your dashboard, you're going to see a few things. The most important one for most is going to be the status update section, which tells you about how many volunteers you have in the different statuses. It also tells you about upcoming birthdays and volunteer anniversaries so that you can recognize those. This list that you can easily bring up and maybe send an email to all of these people with birthdays. And when you send that email, the nice thing is that you can choose a template. Happy birthday to my volunteers. I'm going to send them this message. And any email you send to a volunteer is going to be recorded to their profile as well. Other features of the status update include some actions that administrators may want to take. If there's anything they need to review or approve, it's going to be mentioned here, such as changes that volunteers have made to their profiles, to their custom fields, or to their qualifications. If you've activated that function on the fields, then you would have the chance to review a change before it is committed to the database. This is also a great tool if you want to be notified about changes to those types of fields. For example, to be notified when somebody updates or uploads a document to their profile, a new copy of their resume or proof of a certification. You can also be notified of qualifications that will soon expire or have already expired. Qualifications are typically used to track training and certifications and other bona fide job requirements. They're represented by drop-down lists that you can customize the values of and can add expiry dates to if that's pertinent to your needs. Once you have a list of qualifications, you can also use those to control the access to your activities and shifts so that you only get the qualified volunteers who are signing up to be, only somebody with a driver's license can sign up to be a driver or a chauffeur. You could also approve entries that volunteers have submitted for their hours. You can see who is on the clock if they're using the time clock feature, which allow time clock, also known as a kiosk feature in other systems. This is a way that the volunteer can sign in at the beginning of their shift to start the clock and then sign out at the end. And the system will calculate the difference between those times to log the hours on their profile. A few other things on your homepage. I love having pinned searches and saved reports. These are searches that I've previously run and saved to my administrator profile. And the ones that are most useful to me, I've pinned to my dashboard so that I can quickly get maybe just a count of how many people will come up when I run this search. Or it could be a shortcut to access a mailing list, for example. For volunteer recognition, I want to email everybody who's given more than 50 hours. Or I may want to get a report such as, let's see, volunteers have given me more than 15 hours. That's great. So I'll get the names of everybody who meets those search criteria, and then I can continue on to customizing the appearance of my report. Say I want their names, I want how many hours, and I want to know something else, what committees they're on. And then I can view this report in my browser, or I can export it to a spreadsheet as well. We do have all sorts of reports. There's about a couple dozen on themes like hours and feedback, schedules, and personal profile information. And you can customize your reports, or you can use the ones we've already built. For example, if you want to know who your top performing volunteers are, it's really easy to choose hours by volunteer. Select your date range, like the year to date, and then view your report. And this is sorted already from the people who've given the most hours down to the least. And that's an easy way to decide who you'd like to recognize as maybe your volunteer of the month. By the way, when you set up your date ranges for reports, you can choose between exact specific dates or setting up a saved report with dynamic dates. And that's the difference between typing in August 1st, 2023 to August 31st, 2023, or the beginning of this month to the end of this month, which will always be updated to the current month when you run it again. This homepage has also been customized to include our administrator news that we're sharing with our colleagues and the volunteer news that we're sharing with the greater pool of volunteers. They will see this news section when they log into their own portal. You could also include some of your reporting here. Comparisons is some summary reporting that includes the total hours that have been given over different time spans, the number of entries of hours, and feedback fields can be included in here as well. I've mentioned feedback a couple times. That's a way that you could ask some additional questions to your volunteers to track some data at the same time that they log their hours. So you could get some questions like how many people did they help, or what's their level of satisfaction, or were there any incidents, or did they incur some mileage and how much? You can customize those questions and include that in your reporting. It can be really helpful when it comes time to apply for a grant. I should mention that a lot of funders are interested in knowing more than just how many volunteers and how many hours. They'd like to see, what are those volunteers being used for? What impact are they having? Are they satisfied with how they're being managed? Or any number of other measures that can tell so much more about your volunteer program and justify that ask for money that might be helping to pay for your volunteer management system, or pay for your volunteer management staff, or for your volunteer appreciation, or other aspects of your programming. That's going to be some of what Tony speaks about in the following webinar, is measuring the impact of your volunteer program. And so feedback fields are a great tool for that. You're probably interested in knowing, what does the volunteer's profile look like in this system? So we're going to jump into Victoria Smith's profile. She is one of our accepted volunteers. And when we bring up her profile through the quick search, the first thing we see is her dashboard. That includes a little bit of summary contact information and what she's done recently, when we're expecting to see her again. We also have a breakdown of her contributions over the last 12 months and by the different programs and activities that she has contributed her time towards. So we're getting to know her a little better already with how she likes to help out. These badges down here are graphical representations of her contributions and her qualifications. So they could be triggered by milestones of how many hours or how many years of service, as well as by the qualifications on her profile, as well as by the numerical feedback that she has submitted. And every time she crosses a threshold, she'll get one of those badges, which you and she will both see. This also includes contact information. There's a set of standard contact fields, as well as custom fields that your organization will have decided on. These are used to track data in text and numbers, drop-down fields, file uploads, checkboxes, and dates as well. So you've got lots of options here when you create these custom fields, as well as your qualifications, and you can control the visibility of them as well. So some of them may only appear on the application form. Others will appear later when they come back to update their profile. Some of them are presented to the volunteer so that they can fill in the information. Others are in the background. They're for office use only. The volunteer will never see what you wrote. So you can use these not just for your application form and your onboarding, but throughout the volunteer's life cycle to track your relationship with them, to track whether they have a parking pass, to keep track of their reference checks, as well as their exit interview down the line. Whatever you think you may need to have in this system, to understand your relationship with them and to inform your reports. Qualifications we've mentioned here. General interests do somewhat speak for themselves. They can also be used as help wanted ads on your public page to tell people about the different areas or types of activities they could be signing up for. And of course, I'm sure you'll use them to think about how to assign volunteers to one role or to another based on their interests, as well as based on the availability that they've told you they have on a week-to-week basis. Now, you can do a lot of the assignments yourselves. Some organizations prefer to centralize that function and be in charge of who does what. Other organizations kind of are into our philosophy of volunteer management, which is to create the activities and populate this schedule of shifts that you need filled, and then let the volunteers sign up themselves for that which is of interest to them when they're available. And that, if everybody buys into it, is going to save you a lot of time in managing your schedule. When volunteers first sign up for what they like, you're only going to need to worry about filling in the gaps thereafter, which hopefully will be few if you've recruited enough volunteers. On the volunteers profile, as I mentioned, you can assign them individually. You can also check their upcoming schedule and send it to them. All of these are confirmed shifts coming up. Maybe I want to send this volunteer the schedule for next month. So I could view this calendar report, or in a couple clicks, send it to them by email. Getting the calendar view is great. They could print it off and stick it up on the fridge if they like. Volunteers also have options to log into their own portal where they can see their schedule. They could synchronize their schedule with an online calendar, like a Google Calendar, an iCal, or Outlook. And they could sign up for weekly schedule reminders to get that in their inbox, all the shifts they've signed up for over the next couple of weeks. So Volunteer Impact is also a communications tool. You can send emails individually to your volunteers from their profiles. You could also send group emails like we saw with that birthday message. And you can choose from templates that you have created in your account for your various needs. Those templates can include formatted text, and they can also include attachments that you have uploaded to your organization's document library. So it's very easy to share with your volunteers the forms and the handbooks and the handouts and other documents that may be important. Some accounts will have chosen to activate text messaging as well as email. Text messaging is one way, however, from the administrator to the volunteer. They cannot respond to it due to the limitations of that web system. But all of those messages will be logged to the volunteer's profile here. You can see all the previous emails that have been sent. And you can also add permanent notes that you type yourself into the system. The notes log is permanent and immutable. So once that note has been written, you won't be changing it again. but your administrators can refer back. As one example, this is a great place to keep track of disciplinary notes if something were to occur. Okay, that's a good little look at the volunteers profile. Let's do a quick little search just to show you how you can narrow down the list of volunteers according to your needs, maybe for a communication or to check their profiles or to narrow who you want to assign. So in many places, you'll have a search page that looks a bit like this, and we could choose first, we want just our accepted volunteers, and then we want to add some more search criteria. And I want to look for volunteers who are signed up for a certain activity. It could be either signed up or assigned in the future. And let's think about guest services. They're signed up to be a tour guide. So I'm going to add and go. That's going to get me 3 people who are signed up for the tour guide activity for any shift. And from here, I could go and send them a message or edit their profiles, maybe go and assign them to an activity. You can add several overlapping criteria, up to 10 criteria together. And this might include contact information, custom fields, assignments, hours, when they logged in. Really anything that we're tracking in this system is data that you can use to search and segment your volunteer base. One more thing to show you from the administrator view, and then we'll pop over to volunteers and take some questions. So from the assignment side, you might like to look at the calendar view, which is color coded to tell you whether you have enough volunteers assigned to your shifts. If we dig into tomorrow, that's going to bring up a list of all of the activities and the shifts that we've created. The red ones require attention because we haven't got the minimum number of volunteers that we specified when we created that activity. So we could take something like a driver shift and say, I want to now assign volunteers. And I'm going to search for qualified volunteers. They're accepted. They don't have any overlapping assignments, so we don't have any schedule conflicts. And as it's driver on Wednesday morning, I'm going to add that I want that Wednesday morning availability, and they're interested in the transport program. Let's see, what does that get me? I've gone a little bit too narrow. I don't seem to have anybody with that. Maybe if I take off the interest, then we'll get 20 volunteers who are available and they are qualified. So now we could get in touch with Elliot. We're going to send them an email or send an email to a few different people. Maybe we're going to ask them, are you available? Can you log into the system and pick up that shift? Or I've gone ahead and I have assigned you. So you're on the schedule now. If there's a problem, let me know. You're probably not going to do that the day before most of the time, though. Okay, quickly on the volunteer side, we're going to switch to the user view. This is something that administrators can do if they also have the volunteer role on their profile. So looking at my own profile here, I have a dashboard similar to what the administrators saw. I can see the news and information about all of the organizations that I'm affiliated with, including this Example City Museum. That means that I can use a single profile to manage my volunteerism with a number of different organizations that use Better Impact. My contact information is the same, but the assignments and the custom fields and the qualifications, those are unique and kept completely separate from one organization to the next. On my page, I can see my badges and the news. I can see the social media feed that the organization may have chosen to include. I can then get into signing up for opportunities. So I could check the calendar. I'm going to narrow it down just by the organization I'm interested in working with today, just for activities I'm qualified for. So I can see everything coming up here. And say I'm looking for, we'll look at tomorrow again. I can pick up this office assistant shift and just sign up for it, just like that. In this case, I've been automatically assigned because those are the settings the organization has. It's going to appear now on my schedule page. Here we are. For some activities, we may allow the volunteer to cancel their sign up within the software. We can also set limits, like they can cancel, but only a minimum of 2 hours or 6 hours or 24 hours before that shift occurs, so that there's no changes at the very last minute in the software that are catching you by surprise. Maybe for a last minute cancellation, they then instead have to reach out to you directly, have a phone call or send an email. The volunteer can track their hours. The time clock we mentioned before is one method. So is a manual entry of hours, choosing your activity, the date you volunteered, how many hours you gave, filling in any feedback fields. We mentioned those before. And saving that entry. It's now here in the system. This one's pending, waiting for an administrator's review. Volunteers can also contact you by choosing one of the designated contact people for your organization and then sending them an email here. And they can update their profiles, their contact information, their custom fields and qualifications. They could also take some training. E-learning modules are a tool we've added that allows the volunteer to review some content like a training or onboarding materials, maybe also a waiver or a declaration. And they're going to respond to that by filling in some multiple choice questions. And when they get the passing grade that you've designated, that will earn them a qualification on their profile. And once they have that qualification, it might unlock their access to sign up for some new activities that they couldn't sign up for before. The content that you can include here is just about anything that fits in a rich text field. So that means you can add pictures and you can format your text, but you could even embed a video that's being hosted on YouTube or Vimeo, or a document perhaps that's been hosted in your Google Drive or your Microsoft OneDrive. Assuming the sharing settings are public to allow people to get into it, then you can embed that content here. Okay, that's a good little look at both the administrator and volunteer sides of our software. I'll just quickly also show you the public page. This is a recruitment tool that could tell potential volunteers about the organization, rather. These opportunities here that you're seeing in cards, these are some of the general interests that we have in the organization. And they're telling people about the types of roles or departments or duties that they might be able to participate in when they sign up as a volunteer. And the goal here is that they click on one of these and then they want to go and fill in an application. That application will allow them to create their profile, to add their contact information, and to tell you about their availability and their qualifications, and more about their profile according to the questions you have chosen to ask of them. Okay, while we're here, do you have any questions about one side or the other of the software? We'll have to be a little bit quick because some of you may be moving on to the other webinar in a few minutes. Oh, thanks, Aubrey. In the chat, you'll see Aubrey has just shared the link to join Tony's webinar. And that topic there, volunteer management, the shift from volunteer hours to volunteer impact. Does Better Impact connect with Salesforce? Thanks for the question, Krista. No, it does not. We're intentionally limited in our integrations to other systems, and that is a way of maintaining the security and confidentiality of the data. We have decided to be in control of that login and access to all of the data, not to integrate with others. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions yet. So I'll mention we have fantastic users who really love our software. Our users are our biggest cheerleaders. We've been receiving fantastic reviews on g2.com, we mentioned before, as well as on Trustpilot. You can access those sites and see what other administrators have to say about their experience using Volunteer Impact. And if you're having a chat with me or with any of my colleagues about our software, we can also help connect you to potential references if that's part of your vendor evaluation process. Coming up soon, should be just later this week, I'll be sending our today's recording session to you, as well as links to the buyer's guide and the worksheets that we were looking at, so that you can have those resources to fill in yourselves as you work through your selection process. I should also be sharing with you links to our full set of demonstration videos. Those are another 60 minutes or so of some of what we saw today, but going into greater depth. We do also have some more upcoming webinars, which you can see and register for at betterimpact.ca/events. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. I appreciate that you've taken some time out of the beginning of your day. If you have any more questions, I've got a couple minutes left, and I'd also welcome anything that you might want to share by email or by phone call or by scheduling a meeting with me. I'm here to help inform your vendor selection process, make sure that you understand Better Impact and can make the informed decision that's right for your organization. Thank you.